Hello, 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 hello. A little bit early because I'm a little bit tired. And I thought I would just start a little bit early. Hello, Faith Goodman. How are you? How are you? Hello, Mars Kid, Chloe Burring. Hope we're all fine. I'm just going to pop beneath the film the contact details of the Samaritans. No, Nadia was doing her overeating chat tomorrow. We've swapped things round. Where are you? I'm here. So I'm just going to pop underneath this live. Yeah, we're good, thank you. Nadia's going to do hers tomorrow. I'm just going to pop underneath this live for anyone who's in a crisis or a crunch point, the number for the Samaritans. And the point about calling the Samaritans, if anyone's in any dilemma or difficulty, is I can't legally give advice. I can offer my experiences and opinions, but you need someone, a charity like the Samaritans or Mind, but the Samaritans are a good port of call to be able to steer you in the right direction, because of course they're not a final port of call, they're en route to anyone else. Might be alcohol dependency, might be eating disorders, you know, whatever it is, depression, bereavement, grief, trauma, you know, they'll be able to point you in the right direction. And there'll be someone there to talk to you throughout the night, because I realise that many comments go up and I can't necessarily reply to all of them. So mental health awareness. Where are we popping this? Let me just make sure this is all house. Okay, so it's there just beneath the film. And Davis. So yeah, I mean this isn't a normal sort of catch up about coronavirus, though I do think that it's telling that Mental Health Awareness Week this week has happened in the middle of the coronavirus. You know, corona and COVID and everything only makes matters worse, doesn't it? So yeah, great days and good days and bad days. Jeannie Kyle, hello Debbie Yorkshire, hello Lucy Rose, Ellie Proctor. I'm okay. Yeah, I am good. I mean, it's a tricky time, isn't it? Because I think everyone who has some kind of mental health condition, as I've said many times before, is watching the world, is seeing reflected in the world what we feel and think in ourselves most of the time, don't we? So there's a kind of element of, familiarity with the sort of panic, chaos, emotional instability that is writ large everywhere, really, or has been. I mean, I think we are entering a different stage in terms of the COVID specific crisis. But one of the things that is kicking in a lot, I think people are turning to alcohol an awful lot. You know, an awful lot. I don't know. I've never actually rung the Samaritans myself, Faith Goodman. I don't know if they actually give you a reference code. I'm not too sure. But yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that happens, I mean, one of the conditions, one of the givens about most mental health conditions is that it's not good to isolate. I mean, you know, around addiction, one of the main things they used to say to us in rehab is, you know you're in trouble when you start to isolate, because the issue with isolating is you can't be challenged and you can't merge with surrounding society and other people. And so it's critical that we have that engagement. I mean, you might be like me, slightly more of a hermit and less sociable than someone else. But even me, you know, we all rub up against people in life, and we're all challenged in life, and we're all made to reconsider and think about, you know, what our comfort zones is. And by and large, I do think there's a sort of an adage, which is, if you feel like you're not wanting to do something that isn't bad for you, say, but you're wanting to, you know, if you don't want to go for a walk, or if you don't want to, excuse me, I've got a really itchy foot, if you don't want to do exercise, or if you don't want to cry, or if you don't want to talk to someone about something that's tricky, by and large, you kind of probably should. And I think that's quite an important gauge on where you're at with your emotions. So, you know, so yes, being on your own, all of us being in some degree of self-isolation, kind of runs against the Sawalha-Adderleys itchy foot. Who's that? Is that Nadia? Oh, God, really itchy foot. I think that's Nadia. Itchy foot, yeah. Uh, God, I'm a bit thrown all over the place. Is that you, Nad? Tom W. If I'm honest, I'm really feeling well mentally with everything that's going on. At the start of all this, I did worry it was going to kick my bipolar off, but thankfully not. I'll tell you why, Tom. I think one of the reasons I think a number of people feel a sort of, it's not that one feels better, all the same conditions are there, but one feels less marked out as different. So there's a sort of familiarity to everything that's going on around us. And in a weird way, what that means is it kind of sanctions and permits us to feel as incomplete as we do. Do you know what I mean? The sense of incompletion, the lack of perfection, the inability to. Oh yes, it is Nads. Hello, Nads. The inability to, you know, the ability to sort of essentially be sanctioned. You know, it's like the world is saying it's all right to feel like this, and so for a moment we sort of feel kind of all right. I mean, I've got some major worries about where we're going to be 6 months, 7 months, 8 months down the line. Not just when all the kind of other issues with COVID have happened, but when, you know, society as a whole returns to that addictive, competitive, comparative pursuit of life. Do you know what I mean? Everyone's like, oh, I've got this, I've got more than this, I'm doing this, I'm going there, I'm buying this, I've got that, I want that, I've had this, you know, all that stuff is the stuff that, if I'm honest, I mean, today I got a bit down about a return for myself, a return to those pretty meaningless things. Do you know what I mean? God, I wasn't expecting to be asked to give advice on growing parsley whilst talking about this. Did someone just ask about parsley? Because it's funny you should say that, because I am actually trying to grow parsley for that. So yeah, so I think, you know, it's really important that we recognise on some level, yeah, like you say, Tom W, it's like a free pass to feel how I feel. And I think, was it you, Tom, or someone else said very early on in this that, you know, all the shoulds have kind of gone out the window. There isn't that feeling of one should do this or should be that or should be this and should be all things. So I think that in a sense is good. But so again, it makes kind of sense that the worry is that when everyone's kind of no longer in their own mental health crisis, when we're no longer in a societal mental health crisis, they're going to all, there is a feeling sometimes, does anyone else get this, that all the normal people, no one's normal, but all the normal people are going to rush off back into the land of normal, and we're all going to be left behind again. And I think that's why something like Maximus and co-vlogs, your comments are being shown, and that's why I think something like Mental Health Awareness Week is an important thing to increase awareness. I do think there's a danger. We were talking to a friend of ours, Miranda's boyfriend, ages ago, who was saying, you know, we were sort of sharing this idea that sometimes, though, even the act of having a week dedicated to mental health awareness makes everyone in the normal world feel like it's been dealt with for that week. Oh, we're all aware of it. But I mean, mental health awareness is about far more than just being aware of it, isn't it? So, yes, what are some of the challenges in lockdown? Increased drinking, an ability to indulge in addictive behavior without anyone or as many people being there to check our behavior. So that's a major problem. Loneliness, an ability to just stick within our own dysfunctional thinking. You know, so all sorts of conditions like body dysmorphia and all that sort of stuff can just be allowed to just ferment and get worse because it's very hard to communicate with and get comfort from all those people and all our support networks, and what have you. So some of my predictions are, you know, I keep hearing reports about how many people who've stayed sober or been sober or were sober going into lockdown who are sadly relapsing. And then, you know, I think there's a far bigger number of people who are, you know, serious drinkers or have serious drinking problems who are going to become and be alcoholics essentially by the time we get out of this. And I think as a society, it flabbergasts me that we still have this attitude. I mean, don't get me wrong. I want all my kids to have I took, we bought Maddie some ciders for her and her friends the other night. This isn't about not drinking, but, recognizing that there's a drink problem and that using drink to manage things is a really bad thing, and it's amazing that society doesn't realize that. If you were to kind of account for all the cost of what alcohol does to society in terms of the cost to the NHS, probably on an annual basis, it's as much as what COVID's done in the last 6 to 12 weeks. But we would never dream of questioning our drinking habits, would we? What about anxiety, Adam? We're not really talking about the app with London, I'm afraid. Sorry. So, what do we think about anxiety? How are people feeling on the anxiety spectrum? Because I go from feeling quite, I mean, I wake up in a terrible state thinking there's got to be something awful. I think that just must be the sort of overwhelming cloud, because, of course, one of the components of anxiety is the feeling or the fear. You feel bad, Louise Marie Davis, is the fear that something left field and unpredictable is going to sort of yank the secure world from us. I mean, the idea that there's a secure world in the first place is a fraud, so you can remove that. But do you know what I mean? Anxiety is all about this fear that, we're not being able to control things enough and something might come in. And I think in this instance, with anxiety, I think the news, yeah, Nadia's chat Francois Camanzuli is going to be tomorrow. I think the news has a huge, huge burden of responsibility for generating anxiety and fear. Fear is the acronym false evidence appearing real. I think that's really useful. And I think that's all the press have pursued. I think coupled with a government that looks like it's constantly been reacting rather than being proactive. So, that doesn't help. So it feels like we've got a parent figure, if you like, that's kind of making up the solutions as they go along. So there's not really any parental confidence there. So I think, a number of elements in society have dropped the ball. And so the only thing you can really think about is yourself. And I think one of the key things you can do is reduce news consumption. I think have periods of time in the day where you're absolutely off your screen. I mean, I think one of the reasons me and Nadia, or Nadia, in fact, obviously not me, suggested that we come off our phones for a bit, which we did like yesterday, was to remove that sort of endorphin compulsive, I'm going to get something back from my phone. Because I don't know about anyone else, but I'm checking my phone all the time for the latest news, the latest updates, what's happening on social media, how's it affecting on people, people and stuff like that. Different if you're sitting down to watch Netflix or Gogglebox or something escapist, which is why actually on our Popcorn Junkies Instagram thing, I've been trying to suggest movies for lockdown, because there's something about a movie experience that's totally, you can escape everything. Or like a series like Unorthodox that we watched, you can drop into a different world, or Dead to Me, and all this kind of stuff. So I think, there's a real distinction between social media and then there's social media like this, where I hope it's very, collaborative and collective. And I mean, in a minute, I really want to share some of what you're saying. And you know what I mean? There's an opportunity for us to talk with each other and for you guys to hear that it's quite normal to feel anxious. I think and so I go through these peaks and troughs of anxiety, and that goes to the heart of why I stopped, in conjunction with my doctor, my antidepressants or my anti-anxiety pills, whatever they are. The component of depression and anxiety is like that, because I wanted to have sort of ownership of when I felt stressed or worried. Excuse me. And trying to sort of, I do find that sort of artificial knocking the top and not knocking the bottom off your feelings does lead to a sort of monotone. But sometimes I don't want that. Adam, if you wouldn't mind not spamming with all of your messages, just send it once and I'll respond. What do you recommend for people who have depression? I'm 22. I try to ignore new. I don't know. I don't understand that, which is helping a bit. I liked Dead to Me. Help me ignore what happened. Yeah, well, that's good. I would recommend, if you're suffering from depression, you obviously need to seek medical help first, or therapeutic help. Therapeutic help first, then potentially medical help. Cognitive behavioral therapy worked really well for me. Now, this is something that's going to be very hard to kind of even, sign up to during lockdown. And yet I do know that there are CBT sessions that are happening online and virtually. So go to the Anxiety UK website. They have free, they have links to various therapeutic sessions that you can go to, or group sessions. You can talk one-to-one with specialists. Mind, you can go there. It's another charity. Samaritans, the Samaritans isn't just there for anyone who's feeling ultimately suicidal. Obviously, it's there for them, but they're also there as a resource tool. Think of them as the Citizens Advice Bureau for the head and the heart. Claire Ross Reed, my anxiety has been sky high due to wearing a mask for a 12-hour shift. Well, yeah, you know what? I mean, for anyone with any sort of element of OCD, OCD is a really meaningful and stressful mental health condition. I think we all use that. I fall foul of it. We all use the phrase, "Oh, I'm a bit OCD today," and it's a bit dismissive. I mean, I don't take offence when people say, "Oh, I feel a bit depressed today." I don't feel like, "Oh, you're kind of not understanding depression," or when often people say, "I feel a bit bipolar." "Oh, you're kind of." It's never meant like that. So I hope people don't take offence from it. But Louise Marie Davies, I suffer from derealization, which is caused by anxiety. It's awful, and I also have OCD. There you go. You see, I mean, we're in a situation now where, if you can imagine, as a drinker, you're encouraged not to drink, and sometimes as an overeater or someone who's struggling with an eating disorder, you're encouraged not to binge eat or to eat, to have controlled eating or mindful eating. Imagine being told, when your treatment for OCD, which is to not obsessively wash your hands and clean and make things stay in order, imagine being told by everyone that that's exactly what you have to do. And I mean, as we enter back into the real world, we're going to be entering into a world that's going to be demarcated principally by taped areas, chalked areas, the edges of things. I mean, we're going to have, Nadia's talked a lot about her feeling of agoraphobia. And she doesn't mean she's literally got agoraphobia, but like everyone in this crisis, everyone's got a bit of everything. And I think that's an important thing to think. Sometimes we, and I talk about myself here, we can feel like we are the proud owners almost of a mental health condition. And I think it's really important sometimes, and I think this is where 12-step recovery meetings work, and other organizations like the one run by Sober Dave, Sober Sessions. I think it's really important that we recognize our experiences might be very specific to us, but they're incredibly similar to other people's. And I think when you feel that you belong to a group, that's quite liberating. And rather than, and I think we need to avoid the idea that this is only happening to me. So like when Nadia says she feels a bit agoraphobic, I think we're all feeling a bit agoraphobic. And that's a real concern, because there'll be other people who are in lockdown who were already on their way to being agoraphobic, for whom it will have got worse. And I think that's where this crisis is really going to sort of develop some issues. I think coming out of this crisis, the government really is going to need to think about, pumping a load more money. Forget, just vaccines and all that kind of stuff. But the mental health crisis that we could be looking at after this is massive. Is massive. Yeah, I'm just looking up. A couple of people have talked about this sense of derealization. Derealization occurs when people feel dissociated from their environment. The experience might include perceiving objects as unsolid, diminished in size, or two-dimensional, and the self as perhaps being inside some glass-like container or peering at the world through a glass. So there you go. I mean, that distorted sense of the world and oneself. Well, we are in a distorted world, aren't we? It's such a distorted world. Message in a bottle. BBC Radio Bristol invited me on to talk about agoraphobia. I was terrified, but I did it. Well done, Message in a Bottle. Yeah, good stuff. It's good to talk. It's good to open your mouth. And here's another thing. I mean, one of the things I often get when I go into a 12-step meeting, is I worry about what it is I'm going to have to say. And then I get really conscious, and then I get really self-conscious, and then I get really self-aware, and then I start to kind of clam up. Do you know what I mean? I mean, and so that sort of it compounds your fear and your anxiety. So I often sit in a say an AA meeting when I know I'm going to open my mouth. I spend most of that meeting not getting from it what I went in to get from it, which is relaxed, meditative mindfulness and all that kind of stuff. Because I'm sitting there going, what am I going to say? Am I going to say the right thing? Am I going to say the right thing? And yet it's really important we all push through that, because there's no right and there's no wrong. There's no right and there's no wrong. Look, Nicola Jenkins, that's however I feel, Mark, whenever I need to speak to people outside my little circle. Yeah, and I think it's really important. You know, I fall foul of this. Nadia's is an incredibly gregarious, very big social circle. I have a very tiny pool of people that I trust and I'm very close to. Now, I say I trust. I could trust far more, but it's self-esteem, isn't it? It's self-confidence. It's your lack of self-belief that makes you feel anxious. And you know, I think sometimes, not always, I mean, obviously one can use YouTube and social media too much, but I hope having moments like this where you can hear some numpty like me talking about it, you know, helps. I mean, today I was very much in a bipolar mood. You probably saw in the live earlier, and then after it I really crashed on the sofa as we sat down to watch Gogglebox. Really crashed, and sometimes those crashes, you know, yes, of course, I'm going to do a meeting tomorrow, do an AA meeting tomorrow, a Zoom meeting. But sometimes it's really important just to take ownership of how dark you can feel. You know, I think sometimes it's just really important if you've got people around you and just say, look, I'm feeling really shit. I'm feeling really dark. I'm feeling really alone. I mean, and as long as you're not obviously, you know, I think we can judge whether we're feeling uncontrollably suicidal. So I'm not talking about that sort of thing. I'm talking about you just suddenly, you know, it's quite normal, and we try and stress this to our kids. It's quite normal to have an enormous cloud over you at times, you know, and it's all right. It's all right. It's all right to feel shit, you know. Jake Danat, I fear. Well, we're just waiting for it to come through. I fear I'm close to a depressive state, but managing to cope okay. Is there any live chat online platforms I could use to talk to? I don't know, Jake. I don't know. Let's see if there's any live depression chat. I mean, what you don't want, what you absolutely don't want, is to just go to any chat room. I mean, you really don't want to do that. You don't want to go to a place where you don't know, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, because Nadia's off the telly, because I've, you know, I'm married to him, because we've talked about a lot of this in a public sphere, you know, I've been very public about going into rehab. I'm 16 years sober. You know, there's relative safety to what I'm saying in terms of myself. What I do, I have cause for concern with, you know, Facebook and all that, is that you get these organisations, or you hear about these terrible chat rooms where people just perpetuate the problem. People troll. You know, there are some unhappy and unpleasant people out there. So, you know, with all these things, if you don't know what there is, you can contact absolutely any charity like Mind. Mind is a good one, and just an Anxiety UK especially, and just say to them, look, guys, just contact the helpline. There's always an email address or there's a phone number. You know, could you advise me on any chat rooms or helplines or discussion groups or therapy sessions? And they'll send you a list. Paige Elizabeth, hard seeing my partner suffer. It's hard not to resent him. When he's low, I'm high, and when I'm low, he's high. Very hard. I have started therapy, but he's refusing anything. Hard work. Any ideas? Thanks. That's tough. I mean, I can sometimes see when for Nadia it's really frustrating when I'm down, and I feel like there is a football pitch. No, in fact, 6 Olympic stadiums of distance between what I'm feeling, what I'm capable of achieving for myself, and what I see she kind of wants or needs for herself and for the evening and for whatever's going on. And sometimes it can be as much as me just saying, look, I can't get there. I mean, I don't do that enough, but I should perhaps just put my hand and say, I'm really sorry if I'm coming across like this. I mean, we talked a bit today in our Confessions of a Modern Parent podcast about a strategy I have, is that if I'm feeling a surplus of emotion and I'm not wanting the kids to see me upset or too upset, because you don't want your kids to see you too upset, it's frightening for them. You know, Leslie, I'll talk about that in a second. You know, you take yourself away, you take yourself to a private place to cry. But sometimes, you know, if you've got a partner or something, it's probably quite important to say to your partner, look, you know what, I'm going to go into the room, or I'm going to go into the toilet. Just need to get some emotion out of me. I'm just going to have a bit of a cry. Because if you go in there and then come out, then, once you've expended a bit of emotion, you'll be in a better place and a more amenable place, and the two of you and your partner might be able to talk to each other. The Cliff Booth t-shirt, it's lovely, isn't it? Yeah, it's from Maddie. Cliff Booth from Once Upon a Time in America, in Hollywood. What happens if your partner berates you for saying you're having a black dog day again? If I do, I retreat and sleep or meditate. He drinks and wants to listen to loud music. That's so hard. Again, depending on how small your space is. The only thing I could say, berates you if you're having a black dog day again. You need a group, you need a Zoom chat, you need in the current situation, or you just need to be able to get out and talk to someone else who's in the same place as you. You know, I am a great believer that sometimes you need to work out, it's the old serenity prayer, what are the battles you can win? What are the battles worth having? And you just have to accept that some battles aren't worth trying. If you are going to be down, just say, look, maybe say to your partner in that situation, look, I know you can't bear it and I know you're going to be so fed up, but I'm going to just take myself upstairs, watch something else, plug my own music in, or you stay down here, you do your thing. I just need a bit of space and a bit of time. Really flagging stuff up and explaining it. I mean, I never cease to be amazed how much we're a very openy, sharey family. And we have lots of friends, dear friends, who, when we talk to them about this sort of stuff, and they tell us how little they talk to each other within their families, I'm amazed. I'm literally amazed. Gabrielle, I had a job interview and didn't tell anyone because I didn't want to have to tell them I had failed. See, failure is such a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, another big component of anxiety is a fear of failure, isn't it? So you end up not doing things because you're worried you won't be able to do them well, or you're worried you won't be able to, in an OCD manner, do them perfectly. I felt foul of that. Without talking about specifics, some of my children have had those issues, and it's very hard. And I mean, I think the only thing I can say to you from a position of certainty is that failure is absolutely not what it sounds. It's not what it seems. You need to fail. If I hate the word fail, because usually you have to go down A, B, C, D, E routes and come back up them to find F or G or H. Why see them as failures? Nadia says this often. Every single option or moment in life that doesn't happen for you, don't view it as a failure. View it as a reason for something else to happen, or this is, because, and that's not even I'm not a believer in fate, and I'm not a believer in the idea that everything's written, but I am a believer in the dynamics of life, that if one thing can't happen because, say, a job interview fails or you fail to get a job, something else will have to happen. And it's about what you do with that next decision. So, yes, sometimes it's really hard to front other people and present what you've done, especially to family. I mean, I used to get that with my grandpa. I mean, I did very well at school, but I didn't get a grade in one thing, and he would never let me forget it, my granddad. It used to drive me nuts. You've got to remember, these are other people's shit as well. You can't be victim to other people's, not nastiness, because like with my granddad, what was he doing? He it was his way of having a joke with me, but it was just bad. And so you've just got to sometimes work out what can you look after and what can you affect and what can you change. It's not a failure. If they're going to think it's a failure, you can't change that. So let them go. There's a really good phrase by an author called Amitov Ghosh. And in an interview years ago, he said, and this is quite a liberating thought. He said, up until the age of 40, I really worried about what everyone thought of me. And that's a huge component, isn't it, of anxiety and any mental health. What do people think of me? Oh, God, I can't go into that room. What are people going to think? Oh, God, I can't do this. What are people going to think? And he said, up until the age of 40, I worried about what everyone thought of me. He said, I made a decision at the age of 40 to really worry about what I thought of everyone else, i.e., fuck what you think of me. What do I think of you? Actually, I'm spending all my time sweating and falling apart and getting stressed and feeling anxious and fretting and digging a hole to hide myself. But in actual fact, you're really not a very pleasant individual. And yes, you can eventually at some other point get to the further stage of understanding. It's like understanding the bully. I mean, you might have heard on our Confessions of a Modern Parent, Nadia can understand the bully immediately. I can't. I need to be able to say, you're an arsehole, fuck off. A little bit later, okay, well, now I can understand it. I just needed to get you away from me. But I think that thing of up until the age of 40, I worried what everyone thought of me. After the age of 40, I thought, you know what? I'm going to worry what I think about everyone else. And that's helped me massively. And if I could say, you know, one line I try to give my kids from 12 to 20, mid 20s, all the time I say to them, if you can embrace that thought as soon as possible in your lives, you won't eradicate mental health issues, but you will eradicate that huge public image element. Do you know what I mean? Because I think people underestimate the extent to which a mental health crisis is quite a selfish thing. It is an egotistical thing. We are thinking of just us because we are just us. We are all just us. And we're not thinking of ourselves to the detriment of not thinking about anyone else. The problem for most people with mental health conditions is that however much we'd like to escape the confines of what we think of ourselves, we can't. And that, in a sense, is the illness. So it's not just selfish, but a huge part of that is worrying what other people think. And I've seen with all my kids, I've seen it with friends, and I have lived by this problem most of my drinking life, but also most of my sober life. You know, I mean, get this for an example. For 6, 7, 8 years when I was at the top of my game directing, I used to be embarrassed saying I was a director when I was out in public, because whenever I said to someone I was a director, people would glaze over and just look at me. So I ended up not saying what I did because people didn't know what it meant. What do you mean you direct? I don't understand. What does that mean? People didn't understand it. Documentaries? Oh, I just thought that shit happened. I just thought you saw it. You know, so many of our issues about self-confidence, self-esteem, standing do come from how we think of other people. So that's why that one phrase really, really helped me. Peggy Ward, what do you want to do differently at 50? Well, you know what, Peggy? At 50, I'd like to be able to embrace that quote even more. Ironically, I think most people who have social anxiety, my advice would be use this enforced lockdown as an opportunity to think this. And this could help quite a few people, I think, with social anxiety, because I have it. Just think when I mean, I know everyone's out there on beaches and doing their shit and doing all that sort of stuff, but when we're in a more formally, go out sort of mode, how about this? Think to yourself, say this to yourself: everyone's starting on a blank canvas, relatively. Everyone's been enforced for 60 to 70 days not to be able to do too much. You know what? Why don't I just have a bit more of a spring in my step, and why don't I try and be a bit braver and just step out a little bit more? Just a little bit more. Because I'm feeling that thing of thinking, you know what? Yeah, I wouldn't mind going to that big glitzy do. I mean, with us, it's very different. You know, Nadia often gets invited to all these kind of glitzy things, and they're, I mean, in work, I'll deal with all sorts of kind of, big wigs at television shows. When it's work related, I'm fine, but when it's social related, I'm not so fine, because I know I can't drink, because I know that sometimes I think, oh well, people just want to talk to Nadia. It's like, what am I doing here? And so just try and park all that stuff aside. Park all my stuff aside, because everyone's coming from a place of fucking hell, we've all been in a fucking hole. Fucking hell, we all got a glimpse of mental health fucking madness. Oh my God. So us lot who've got mental health problems, what we've got is going to be the subject of chat, isn't it, in most bloody social situations? So get out there as soon as you can right at the beginning, and it might resolve a lot of your social anxiety. Lucy Rose, I'm 49. Same age as Baby Yoda. Well, he's actually a year over. Overthinking. Jess edits. Overthinking is a major problem. I'd like to, at the age of 50, overthink less. Louise Jones, 23 years of depression, PTSD, anxiety. I'm the same as you, Mark. I'm not on meds as I need to feel my moods. I'm so used to my condition. It's like an old friend. Yeah, and something I was talking to Kiki and Maddie about the other day when they were dealing with an issue. I had a shrink when I was in rehab who told me this brilliant, used this brilliant analogy. And he said that, he used to call him Cosmic Simon. And he said that in our hearts, at the center of every person, is like, imagine a well, like a good old fashioned well with a bucket that goes down. There's a well. And at the bottom of that well, there's fire. No, I don't procrastinate enough. I'd like to procrastinate. Procrastinate allows me to daydream, Mel W. No, I kind of get on and get on and get on. imagine there's this sort of, well, but fire's flying out of it. That fire, if you get angry, or if you let it get jealous, or if you drink too much, you will get burnt by that fire, and it will burn you, and it will burn those around you. So that for me is almost my mental health there. And he made a really important point. He said, don't try and put out that fire. That fire is what makes you you. Try and find a way of being able to walk round it, take heat from it. It will flare sometimes, because it's like another one of these things is often we're told you should never be angry. That's not true. Sometimes when someone's an arse to you, it's all right to be angry. There are occasions to be angry. But it's just quite a nice image that I use sometimes, which is I don't want to deny that force, that fiery force that's inside me, that sometimes hurts and is obviously probably the key to my not being totally mentally stable. But at the same time, try and just use those skills of the things that we're talking about, really, the 12-step meetings and all that kind of stuff, and kindness and self-kindness and finding time and exercise and all this kind of stuff. Just find a way to kind of negotiate your way around that fire. Read the book Touched by Fire on Bipolar. Oh, there you go. Oh, what was that? Just heard a sort of squeaky sound. Had Nadia had big plans for your 50? That's had to be cancelled now. She did. She won't tell me what they are, in case probably she's going to rearrange them for next year. See, that's a classic. My ideal 50th would have been me trekking with a bunch of strangers who I'd have got to know. This is it. I'm very social, but not very sociable. So I'd have loved to be with a bunch of strangers, this is the kind of stuff we used to film, trekking through the Saharan desert for 6 weeks, struggling. I'd have loved that. Because I think that kind of challenge, that sort of stuff, like when we went to the North Pole, is a nice counterpoint to the shit that's going on in your head. How can I stop always thinking the worst? Marcia Toms. Well, one way is, were you thinking the worst yesterday? And did by the end of the day the worst happen? No. So you have to ask yourself, I think, use some CBT techniques. Use what I call the court of law in your head. If you're having a negative thought, try and put it through, take it to court. Have the prosecution and the defense. So, for example, back in the days when I was jealous, I was really jealous. I thought Nadia was going to run off with someone. Right, okay, where's the evidence that she could? Okay, and you go through it. Has she ever done this? Has she ever been this? No. Where's the evidence that she might not? Well, she hasn't done it before. And what you do is you quite literally list all of the likelihoods of something happening versus the evidence of whether it has or hasn't. And what you'll find is, this is why you write your negative thoughts down for CBT, you'll find, Marcia, quite quickly that you're addicted to thinking things will go wrong rather than the fact that things will go wrong. And there will be some comfort found in looking back at these notes that you could make, and that might help. I mean, that's something that they do in CBT, catastrophic thinking, absolutely. Worrying things hardly ever happen. And the other thing that I often say, I mean, I always think, it's funny, isn't it? It's being a dad really helps me, actually, because you're thinking, right, God, I've got this problem. The other thing is that unless you're hit by a car and you're bleeding out and you need to get an ambulance, or, there are many other situations where there can be an urgent situation, often critical and often physical, and sometimes mental, obviously, that's Samaritans, what have you. But if you're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, stressed, like the worst could happen, always remember, everything doesn't need to happen now. I.e., whatever's possibly going to happen isn't all going to happen now. It just isn't. It rarely does. And you trying to resolve it or solve it doesn't all have to happen now. I'm thinking of things like, sometimes we can be really bamboozled, can't we? If we get a bill for something that we weren't expecting and it's a lot of money and we're like, shit, I haven't got that, I can't do. Well, they're not coming tonight. They're probably not coming tomorrow. So you can start to just take some of the heat out of it. Doesn't mean you can't resolve it and you don't need to resolve it, but you need to not rush yourself into it. I used to have a thing where I used to say to all of my employees, if you get an email after 5:30 from a broadcaster, because you always get them from the BBC, ITV, going suddenly, oh, we need this. My line on it was at 5:30, anything that comes in after 5:30, if they haven't got it to us sooner, it's not so urgent, it can't be dealt with tomorrow morning. Don't you go home stressed. They love that. But by the same standard, do that in life. If someone wants to suddenly, shake your apple cart at 4:30, 5:30, whether it be a bill, whether it be an authority, maybe it could be anything. Don't let them. Just think, fuck that shit. I need to look after myself. This is me time. I've given my bloody time to the state and the system. I'm going to take time for me, which is why I'm a human and why I'm alive. I mean, I'm saying all this. I don't succeed at this most of the time, but this is the kind of advice when I'm in a when I'm in a good headspace. I take. Bobby Ward, does particular music help you deal with right? I'm big into my dance, electronic dance music. I was a raver and all that kind of stuff. Music's a tricky one for me. It can be euphoric recall, so it can actually make me want to rush off, take ecstasy, get completely blottoed, get drunk, and can have a completely crazy time. Not literally, but it's what they call euphoric recall. Euphoric recall. So again, some people who don't have mental health issues think that putting on a big tune is going to help you. And one of the funniest things Maddie often says to me is, Dad, even the happiest tunes you find sad. And that is less about the tune, it's more about the frame of mind. So I would always double check with anyone in your life or with yourself. Is music necessarily always the key to solving something? Because for me, it isn't always. But then sometimes it absolutely can be. And I can have a good dance. I often put on a lot of jazz. I like jazz. That really helps me because it's a bit discordant and it's a bit kind of ding, 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 I should Lucy Rose join in on the 80s workout. Mrs. O, music makes me too emotional. Yeah, yeah. I mean, sometimes I have to say to the girls, they'll say, "Can we put music on in the car?" And I love them listening to music, and I love talking. I mean, music's one of my passions. I mean, when you look at my record collection, I mean, I just love music. Music is what defines the films that I make. That's why my short film's on pause at the moment. I want the right music in place before I can finish editing it. So, Amy Bentley, do you think that there are any benefits plus sides of experiencing mental health issues? Yes, immense, immense benefits. I think as long as you don't use it manipulatively, I think in some ways, I'd say you have a higher, whatever the nature of your mental health condition, there's some higher connection with what it actually means to be a human being. I like to think sometimes that perhaps those of us who struggle more are struggling more because we are a little bit more insightful in some way, and I don't mean that arrogantly, but spiritually insightful, and it's tough to deal with that insight. And so I like to think that sometimes perhaps it's a gift because, well, in my instance, I think it's a gift because I can try and help my children with it. If I think about the curse of alcoholism and addiction, it's so that I can try and steer my children into responsible drinking. Do you know what I mean? Nadia is in bed. Do you feel there are more empaths with mental health issues? Xander, that's a good question. I do think so. And I do think being an empath can be an excruciatingly difficult, excuse me, condition because it kind of intercepts the term. I don't know if anyone knows it. The term of codependency. Codependency is a massive problem. Yeah, I've been to CODA meetings, which is Codependents Anonymous, and some of those meetings I've seen people. It wasn't entirely me, but I've had periods in my life where I've been so codependent. There was a period in my life with Nadia when I was at my worst where I was so codependent. And codependency, there's a fine line. A good couple or a good friendship, you might have a group of friends. You are dependent on your social circle. You could argue that someone with a group of friends is codependent on them, but then there's codependency. But codependency can be an excruciatingly painful condition. I mean, I remember thinking when I came out of a CODA meeting, Jesus Christ, that was hardcore, really. But I do think being an empath can be a real problem. Can be a real problem. To feel other people's pain so much is a real problem. I just saw someone, Rosie Reed, Mark, do you think there is ever an excuse for someone to be violent towards you due to mental health issues. I don't think there's ever an excuse, and I think we need a better funded system to ensure, for example, I mean, in our neighbourhood, there are, you can only walk out that, there's, that there are so many gradations of mental health conditions. And there are those that sadly, without wishing to talk about it too much, but, Nanny Di's partner, for example, ex-partner who died, sadly killed herself last year. She was sectioned several times before she took her own life. And, we can all wonder what other steps could have been taken to prevent what happened. And this is the important deal, guys. For everyone that succeeds in taking their lives, there are thousands and far more who successfully don't and are rewarded and pleased with their lives that they don't. So even if you're in the darkness of that depression sometimes, however dark it is, it's like I always say again to my girls and to friends, is even darkness passes. Do you know what I mean? God, I sound like Yoda, don't I? Even darkness passes. We all know that feeling of we're having a great time and what a shame it's going to end. Well, the inverse of that is we're all having a shit time. It has to end. But it can end alive and it can end positively. Do you know what I mean? So I don't think there is an excuse in answer to that. But I think that's not really what it's about, is it? I mean, if someone was to attack any of us with a machete and they had schizophrenia, I would, of course, be furious with that person, but they're also compromised, aren't they? And I'd be then looking at what's the state done to stop that from happening. Sandy, next Wednesday is the 6-year anniversary of my daughter's friend committing suicide. She was 13 years old. Not a good time at the moment. Oh, bless you, Sandy. Sending you and your daughter love and all our thoughts. We've lost many people to suicide in our lives. Terry Whitworth, I lost a friend to suicide and we didn't even know he was depressed. He was a paramedic and wondered sometimes if he saw too much and bottled it up. Yeah, I think trauma really can sort of repeated trauma really can just take slices of your spirit away. I do think there's a spirit. Sarah Curtis, yeah, I think, you see, even darkness passes. It's true. I mean, it should be a Jedi truism, shouldn't it? I think Yoda, even anger passes. The Wonder Woman, The Highly Sensitive Person by Elaine Aron is an important book if you're an empath, and can help you cope with acceptance and realizing you have a gift. I mean, I think the thing about on the one hand, empathy is considered one of the greatest attributes to have, but of course it isn't if it starts to harm you. And we hold in high regard, don't we, the empathetic acts of people, but then there also has to be the self-preservation of the person feeling those things. So I think, again, it's all about finding moderation. And as you know from our vlogs, I struggle with moderation in virtually every department of my life. Lucy Rose, do you think everything you and Nanny Di have gone through, what make you guys talk openly of your feelings and what you have experienced? Yeah, I mean, I think me and Nanny Di have had a really it is a really interesting, I mean, I think it would make a fascinating read, me and Nanny Di's story, because I grew up as a single child, only child from a single parent household. She came out as gay when I was 7, and she was going through, in retrospect, I realise, probably more than she does, because she can't remember half of it, how much of a torrid time she was having as an incredibly attractive young woman who was taken advantage of by men and women. And I was her sort of companion watching this. And so we had, there were many regrets and resentments and anger that I had with her. But that was another part of rehab. What was great about rehab was family therapy is not something to be averse to. Family therapy is something me and Izzy have done because, she essentially has come from a broken home. And there's nothing wrong with family therapy. And family therapy can come free on the NHS. You might have to wait, but there is nothing wrong. Nothing bad will come of it. It can only, even if it doesn't resolve anything, it will give one part of the party in there the opportunity to say stuff. And the way rehab works, I do genuinely believe that rehab works successfully for those people who go into rehab, and I'm talking about rehab for eating condition, you know, eating disorders, alcoholism, gambling, sex addiction, all these things. If your family comes in and you are all, as they say in the trade, fearsomely honest with yourselves. So you need to hear. It's important. When I heard from my wife and my mother and my friends, just how chaotic my life had become. It was only then that I could see them saying it to me, and I wasn't drunk, and I was in a safe therapeutic space. Could I then take it in? No, I didn't do the Hoffman process CD. Did you and Nanny Di ever have a fight? Oh my God, yes, huge verbal fights. Well, no, I would never strike my mother. No, she struck me a lot. I'm a total storm addict. My high school friend committed suicide 4 days ago. It shook me up a little, made me think mental health awareness. So many tried, but she still jumped off a cliff. Total storm addict. I'm so sorry. That's so awful. You know, and yeah, you know, the survivor's guilt. It's such a terrible thing. That you know, we're all left thinking, what could we have done more? What could we have done more? And so many people talk about the selfishness of it too. But you know, at the end of the day, you know, you're not in a straight frame of mind when you take your life. You're not able to orientate yourself. You know, if you feel that you're a burden on everyone, then of course you feel like you're down a deep, deep hole. Which is why, literally, I mean, you walk along Waterloo Bridge in London, the Samaritans number is every 20 yards or so along it. So yeah, oh wow, we've almost talked for an hour. My God. We should do this again, guys, shouldn't we? I hope there are some thoughts in there that help. I hope there are some ideas in there, some little maxims, some little thoughts. Nadia's going to be doing hers tomorrow. You're a lovely bunch of coconuts. I think if we're all mad together, I'm not suggesting for a minute that you're all mad. I think embrace madness. That's what I try and do with Mental Marquee, is take ownership of it and just go to the very heart of it. Here's the other thought. Anyone who has any form of genuine mental health condition is a very special person. You know, you're probably going to be a bit kooky, a bit weird, a bit unconventional. And you know what? For me, the most interesting things in life are unconventional and not the mainstream and not the ordinary or the normal. So stay being mad as a box of frogs. Stay being not normal. And you know we all love you, and you know we're all here for you. That was really good, guys. Anyway, do watch it back, and do send this to friends. Big hug, Sander. Do send this to friends. I think you're Nicola Randall. I think you probably are weird, in a good way. Do share this with friends if you know anyone else who is struggling, or you come across someone in a couple of days and you think, oh, you need to listen to this fucking mad chap in a room with Yoda. He might sort you out. Anyway, see you tomorrow. Check out tonight's vlog at some point tomorrow. All right, guys, lots of love. Mwah. Sleep tight. Bye.